Admiral Jake Morrison stood at the edge of the observation deck, staring into the empty blackness of space. 6 months had passed since the Draconian Third Assault Fleet had simply vanished. 847 ships, over 2 million alien soldiers, gone without a single trace. The war room behind him buzzed with nervous energy. Earth's top military leaders waited for answers he did not have. Jake turned away from the window and walked to the holographic display showing the solar system. Red dots marked where the Draconian fleet should have been. "Show me the data again," Jake said to his aide, Lieutenant Tony Banks. Tony pressed a few buttons on his tablet. The display showed energy readings from the past week. "Still nothing, sir? No debris? No distress signals? No bodies floating in space? It's like they never existed." Dr. Lisa Carter looked up from her computer terminal. She had been working on this puzzle for months, trying to understand what had happened. Her dark hair was messy from running her hands through it. She looked tired. "Admiral, I've been studying the energy signatures we detected 6 months ago," Lisa said. "Right before the fleet disappeared, our sensors picked up something strange. The readings don't match anything in our databases." Jake walked over to her station. "What kind of readings?" Lisa pulled up a chart on her screen. "Quantum fluctuations. But not the normal kind. These were organized, almost like they had a pattern, and they were massive. The energy involved was enough to power Earth for 1,000 years. Could it be a new Draconian weapon?" asked General Sam Phillips, the head of Earth's ground forces. "No," Lisa shook her head. "The energy didn't come from their ships. It came from empty space itself. Like something was already there, waiting. For them?" Jake felt a chill run down his spine. "Waiting for them?" "I know how it sounds," Lisa said. But the timing was too perfect. The moment the Draconian fleet entered our solar system, these energy readings appeared. Then both the readings and the fleet disappeared together. Captain Ben Rodriguez had been quiet during the meeting. He commanded the exploration ship U.S. Horizon, and his job was to investigate strange phenomena in space. He had seen things that most people would not believe. "Dr. Carter, could you send me those energy readings?" Ben asked. "My ship out there and look around. It's dangerous," Jake warned. "We don't know what happened to the Draconians. The same thing could happen to you." Ben stood up and adjusted his uniform. "With respect, Admiral, we need to know what we're dealing with. If something out there can make an entire fleet disappear, we need to understand it before it happens." Again, Lisa nodded. "I'll come with you. I need to see this for myself." Jake looked around the room at his team. These were good people, brave people, but they were also scared. Everyone on Earth was scared. The Draconian Empire had been humanity's enemy for 20 years. Their fleets had attacked human colonies, killed millions of people, and pushed humanity to the edge of extinction. Then suddenly their biggest fleet had vanished. Earth's military leaders did not know if they should celebrate or prepare for something worse. "All right," Jake said finally. "Captain Rodriguez, take your ship and investigate, but be careful. Stay in constant contact with Earth. If anything strange happens, you come back immediately." "Understood, sir." Dr. Carter packed her equipment and joined Captain Rodriguez's crew aboard the UES Horizon. The ship was not large, but it was fast, and had the best sensors in the human fleet. As they flew toward the area where the Draconian fleet had disappeared, Lisa watched her instruments carefully. "Are you seeing this?" she asked Ben. Ben looked at the sensor readings. "What am I looking at?" "The quantum distortions are still there. They're faint, but they're growing stronger as we get closer." Lisa's voice was excited but also worried. "This is impossible. Quantum distortions should fade within hours. These have been stable for 6 months." The UES Horizon reached the coordinates where the Draconian fleet had last been detected. Space looked normal to the human eye, but the ship's sensors told a different story. "Captain," called out engineer Danny Foster from his station. "I'm getting some weird readings from the hull sensors. It's like something is pushing against the ship, but there's nothing there." Ben felt it too. The ship was moving through space normally, but something felt wrong. The stars looked different, though he could not explain how. "Lisa, are you recording this?" Ben asked. Every second, she replied. The quantum readings are off the charts. Whatever happened here, it left a mark on space itself. Lieutenant Sarah Murphy, the ship's communications officer, looked up from her console with a confused expression. Captain, I'm picking up something. On the radio, it's very faint, but it sounds like voices. Draconian voices, Ben asked. I don't think so. It sounds like humans, but that's impossible. No human ships have been in this area for months. Ben ordered the ship to stop moving. They floated in the empty space where 2 million alien soldiers had vanished without a trace. The silence was complete, except for the hum of the ship's engines. Play the audio, Ben said. Sarah adjusted her controls and put the signal through. The ship's speakers. The sound was barely audible, like whispers in a distant room. But as they listened, the voices became clearer. They were human voices, and they were calling for help. Lisa stared at her instruments in shock. Ben, according to these readings, those voices are coming from inside the quantum distortions. That's impossible. So is making an entire fleet disappear. Ben looked out. At the empty space around them, something was very wrong here. Something that challenged everything they thought they knew about physics, about space, about reality itself. Sarah, send a message back to Earth. Tell Admiral Morrison we found something. We don't know what it is yet, but we found something. Yes. The UES Horizon continued its investigation. None of the crew noticed the faint shimmer in space around them. Something was watching them, something that had been waiting for humans to return to this place. The mystery of the Draconian fleet was just beginning to unfold. Dr. Lisa Carter had not slept in 3 days. Her laboratory on Earth was filled with computer screens showing DNA sequences, quantum readings, and ancient historical records. Coffee cups and empty food containers covered every surface. She was close to something important. She could feel it. The breakthrough came at 4 in the morning. When she was comparing human DNA samples with the quantum signatures from the Draconian fleet's disappearance site, her computer beeped with a match alert. No way, Lisa whispered, staring at the screen. Hidden in what scientists had always called junk DNA were complex patterns that matched perfectly with the quantum distortions. The patterns were not random. They were organized, structured, like a code waiting to be activated. Lisa called Admiral Morrison immediately, not caring about the early hour. Jake, you need to get down here right now, she said when he answered. His phone? Lisa, it's 4 in the morning. I found something. Something big. Humans are not what we think we are. An hour later, Jake stood in Lisa's lab with General Phillips and Colonel Amy Foster, the head of Earth's Special Operations. Amy was known for her work investigating mysterious events that the regular military could not explain. Show us, Jake, said Lisa, pulled up the DNA comparison on her main screen. Look at this. Every human on Earth carries these patterns in their DNA. We always thought this was leftover genetic material from evolution. Useless code that did nothing. But it's not useless. It's a program. A program for what? Amy asked. I think it's a defense system. Something that activates when humans face extinction. Lisa switched to another screen showing historical data. Amy, remember those disappearances you investigated? The ones where entire armies just vanished? Amy nodded. The Roman Ninth Legion in Britain, the Roanoke Colony, the Franklin Expedition in the Arctic, dozens of others throughout history. Why? Think I know what happened to them now, Lisa said. They didn't just disappear, they were erased. I think humans did it unconsciously. Jake frowned. That doesn't make sense. How could humans erase their own people, not their own people? Lisa explained. The threats to their people. Look at this data. Every major disappearance in human history happened right before a crisis that could have wiped out large numbers of humans. The pattern is always the same. Threat appears, people start disappearing, and then the threat is gone. Colonel Foster studied the information carefully. Are you saying that humans have some kind of psychic weapon that activates automatically? Not psychic. Quantum. Our consciousness seems to be connected to the quantum structure of space itself. When enough humans feel threatened, that connection becomes strong enough to simply erase the threat from reality. General Phillips shook his head. This sounds like science fiction. So did making an entire alien fleet disappear, Lisa replied. But we have proof. The quantum signatures match our DNA patterns perfectly. We are the weapon that destroyed the Draconian fleet. Meanwhile, on the other side of Earth, Lieutenant Commander Steve Walsh woke up screaming. The nightmare had been so real he could still smell the burning metal and hear the alien voices crying out in terror. Steve had fought the Draconians in 3 different battles over the past 5 years. He knew their ships, their weapons, their tactics. But in his dream, he had seen them from a different perspective. He had seen them as prey. His phone rang. It was his old squad mate, Sergeant Rick Mason. "Steve, tell me you had the dream too," Rick said without even saying hello. "The one where we're hunting the Draconians?" "Yeah, but not just us. All of humanity. Like we were all connected, all thinking the same thought." Steve sat up in bed. "How many others?" "I've gotten calls from 12 guys in the last hour. Everyone who fought the Draconians is having the same dream." Steve got dressed and drove to the Veterans Center where many of his old unit members lived. He found them all awake, sitting in the common room, looking shaken. "It felt so real," said Marine Corporal Julie Brooks. "Like I was there when the fleet disappeared. But I wasn't just watching. I was part of what made it happen." "We all were," added Army Ranger Mike Torres. "In the dream, we could feel every human on Earth thinking the same thing. The Draconians had to go. We were a threat to our species, so we made them go away." "But how?" Steve asked. "How could we do something like that?" "I don't know," Julie said. "But in the dream, it felt natural, like breathing, like it was something humans had always been able to do." Back at Lisa's lab, more data was coming in from Captain Rodriguez. In the UES Horizon, the ship had been sitting in the quantum distortion field for several hours, and the crew was reporting strange experiences. Admiral Captain Rodriguez's voice came through the radio with static. "Something is happening to my crew. They're starting to. I don't know how to describe it. They're starting to think together." "What do you mean?" Jake asked. Engineer Foster just solved a problem that Communications Officer Murphy was working on, even though he was on the other side of the ship and they weren't talking to each other. "And Dr. Carter?" "Sir? She's not even on this ship, but my crew keeps saying they can hear her thoughts." Lisa looked up from her computer. "I can hear them too," she said quietly. "It's like voices in the back of my mind. They're telling me about the quantum field, about how it connects all human consciousness." Jake felt a cold fear growing in his stomach. "Lisa, are you saying that being in that field is changing them?" "Not changing them, awakening them. The field is showing them what humans really are." On the UES Horizon, the crew was experiencing something unprecedented. They could feel the thoughts and emotions of every human on Earth, like a vast ocean of consciousness that they had never known existed. "Captain," said Sarah Murphy, the communications officer, "I think I understand what happened to the Draconian fleet now. Tell me they didn't just disappear, they were moved, pushed into a different space, a different layer of reality. I think, I think they're still alive." Ben Rodriguez felt the truth of her words in his mind, shared by the collective knowledge of his crew. "Where are they?" Here Sarah said, pointing at the empty space around them. "They're right here, in the same location. But they exist in a parallel space, separated from our reality by the quantum field. Can we reach them? I think so. But, Captain, if we do this, if we cross into that space, we might not be able to come back. And there's something else." "What?" Sarah looked around at her crewmates, all of them sharing the same terrible knowledge. The Draconians weren't just invading Earth for conquest. They were running from something much worse than them. Could be worse than the Draconian Empire? Something that eats consciousness itself? Something that turns entire star systems into empty, dead space. The Draconians were trying to warn us. Ben Rodriguez realized that humanity had made a terrible mistake. In defending themselves from the Draconian fleet, they had eliminated the only species that could help them fight the real threat that was coming. The awakening of human consciousness was not just a defense mechanism, it was a preparation for war against something that wanted to devour every thinking being in the galaxy, and that something was already on its way to Earth. The quantum distortions around Earth grew stronger every day. People all over the planet were beginning to experience the shared consciousness phenomenon. In New York, a taxi driver suddenly knew how to perform brain surgery. In Tokyo, a child started speaking languages she had never learned. In London, an entire office building of workers stopped what they were doing and began working together on a single mathematical equation that none of them understood. Dr. Lisa Carter stood in the emergency command center that had been set up in the Pentagon. Screens showed reports from around the world of humans displaying impossible knowledge and abilities. But the most disturbing reports were coming from space. The U's horizon has been silent for 6 hours, reported Colonel Amy Foster. Last transmission said they were attempting to cross into the parallel space where the Draconian fleet is located. Admiral Jake Morrison paced back. And fourth, worried about Captain Rodriguez and his crew. Any sign of their ship on our sensors? No, sir. But the quantum readings in that area have changed. Dr. Carter, what are you seeing? Lisa studied her instruments. The patterns were unlike anything she had ever recorded. The quantum field is stabilizing into 2 distinct layers, our reality and another one that exists in the same space but separated by a dimensional barrier. Are they alive? Jake asked. I think so. But they're not in our reality anymore. On the other side of the dimensional barrier, Captain Ben Rodriguez and his crew found themselves in a place that looked exactly like normal space, but felt completely different. The stars were in the same positions, but they seemed dimmer. As if viewed through dark glass. Captain, I'm reading massive energy signatures ahead, reported engineer Danny Foster. It's the Draconian fleet. The alien ships floated motionless in space, their hulls dark and cold. No lights, no movement, no signs of life. But as the UES horizon approached, the Draconian vessels began to power up. They're alive, whispered. Communications officer Sarah Murphy, I can feel their minds. They're terrified. Ben opened a communication channel to the Draconian flagship. A holographic image appeared on the bridge showing a large reptilian creature in ornate military armor. This was Admiral Zethkar, commander of the 3rd Assault Fleet, human vessel. The Draconian spoke in accented English. You should not have. Come here, this place is a prison created by your species' collective mind. We didn't mean to trap you here, Ben said. We didn't even know we could do something like this. Admiral Zethkar's yellow eyes showed both anger and fear. Your kind is more dangerous than you realize. When our fleet approached your world, we felt the awakening of something vast and terrible. Every human mind on your planet joined together and simply erased us from your reality. Why were you invading Earth? Asked Dr. Carter through the ship's communication system. Even though she was still on Earth, her consciousness was connected to the crew through the quantum field. We were not invading, Zethkar replied. We were fleeing. Something is coming, something that devours entire star systems. We came to warn your species and ask for your help. Sarah Murphy felt the truth of his words through the shared consciousness. The Void Seekers, that's what they're called. Feed on conscious thought itself. Yes, Zethkar confirmed. They have already consumed the Altarian Confederation, the insectoid hives, and the machine collectives. Billions of thinking beings, all gone. Our empire is the last major civilization left, and we are losing the war. Ben realized the terrible mistake humanity had made. How long do we have? They will reach this solar system within one of your Earth years, perhaps less. Back on Earth, the situation was becoming more chaotic by the hour. The shared consciousness effect was spreading, faster than anyone had expected. In hospitals, patients were being healed by doctors who had never studied medicine but somehow knew exactly what to do. In universities, students were solving problems that had puzzled scientists for decades, but there was a price. Some people could not handle the connection to the collective human mind. In Chicago, a man named Marcus Webb had been working as Dr. Carter's research assistant. When the quantum field first touched him, he He gained incredible knowledge about physics and mathematics. But he also lost something essential about himself. "Marcus, can you hear me?" Lisa asked as she visited him in the medical facility. Marcus stared at her with eyes that seemed to see through her to something far away. "I can hear everyone," he whispered. "Every human thought, every human dream. I know things that happened 1,000 years ago and things that'll happen 1,000 years from now. But I can't remember my own name sometimes." "We're going to help you," Lisa promised. "Help me?" Marcus laughed, but it was not a happy sound. "I am becoming something more than human. I can see the Void Seekers approaching. They're vast, ancient. Things that exist in the space between thoughts. They turn consciousness into food and leave behind empty shells of matter." Lisa felt a chill. "How do we fight them?" "What?" "By becoming what we were always meant to be. Humanity is not just another species, Dr. Carter. We are weapons. We were created by the universe itself to hunt and destroy those who would devour consciousness." Meanwhile, Lieutenant Commander Steve Walsh had gathered with hundreds of other military veterans in a field outside Washington, D.C. They had all been having the same shared dreams, or visions of humanity's true purpose. "Can you feel it?" asked Sergeant Rick Mason. "The awakening is accelerating. Every human on the planet is starting to connect." Steve nodded. In his mind, he could sense the thoughts and emotions of people all over the world. Fear, confusion, but also something else. Something that felt like a hunting instinct awakening after millions of years of sleep. "We're not just Homo sapiens," said Marine Corporal Julie Brooks. "We're something else. Something designed to protect consciousness from those who would destroy it." Army Ranger Mike Torres pointed to the sky. "I can feel them out there. Void Seekers. They're like holes in space, empty places where thoughts go to die." "Then we better be ready for them," Steve said. Back in the parallel space, Captain Rodriguez was learning more about humanity's enemy from Admiral Zethkar. The Draconian commanders showed them recordings of planets that had been consumed by the Void Seekers. "They do not destroy matter," Zethkar explained. "They consume the quantum patterns that create consciousness. What is left behind looks normal, but it is truly dead. No thoughts, no dreams, no possibility of life ever returning." "How many of them are there?" Ben asked. "We do not know. They may be the last remnants of the first intelligent species in the universe, twisted by eons of consuming other minds. Or they may be something else entirely, a natural force that prevents consciousness from spreading too far." Dr. Carter's voice came through the communication system from Earth. "Admiral Zethkar, will your fleet help us fight them?" The Draconian commander was quiet for a long moment. "Your species trapped us in this place with the power of your collective mind, but perhaps that same power can free us. If you can return us to normal space, the Draconian Empire will fight beside humanity against the Void Seekers." "How do we get you back?" Ben asked. "The same way you sent us here? Your entire species must agree that we belong in your reality, not this prison dimension. But Captain Rodriguez, you should know that doing this will fully awaken humanity's true nature. There will be no going back to what you were before." Ben looked around at his crew. They all felt the weight of the decision. Bringing back the Draconian fleet would mean accepting that humans were something far more dangerous and powerful than they had ever imagined. "Dr. Carter," Ben said, "tell Admiral Morrison that we found the Draconian fleet. They're alive, and they want to help us. But freeing them will change humanity forever." On Earth, the quantum distortions continued to grow stronger. The collective, the awakening, was almost complete. Soon, every human on the planet would be connected to the vast network of consciousness that had always existed just below the surface of their minds. The war for the survival of all conscious life in the galaxy was about to begin. The decision to free the Draconian fleet split Earth's government in half. In the emergency session of the United Earth Council, arguments raged for hours, while the quantum distortions around the planet continued to grow stronger. General Patricia Hayes stood at the podium, her face grim. She had spent her entire career protecting humanity from alien threats. And now she was being asked to trust their greatest enemy. We're talking about releasing over 2 million Draconian soldiers. Patricia said to the assembled leaders. These are the same aliens who destroyed our colonies, killed our people, and pushed us to the edge of extinction for 20 years. Admiral Jake Morrison disagreed. General Hayes, the situation has changed. They came here as refugees, not conquerors. And we need their help to fight the Void Seekers. Do we? Patricia challenged. Dr. Carter says humanity has this incredible power. Maybe we don't need the Draconians at all. Maybe we should let them stay trapped in that parallel space where they can't hurt anyone. In her laboratory, Dr. Lisa Carter monitored the growing quantum field around Earth. Every hour, more humans were connecting to the collective consciousness. The effect was becoming unstoppable. Her assistant, Marcus Webb, sat in a chair nearby. He had not moved for 6 hours, staring at nothing with his strange, distant eyes. Marcus, Lisa said gently, what do you see? See the price, Marcus whispered. Every time humanity uses this power, we lose a little more of what makes us individuals. The collective consciousness is beautiful and terrible. It makes us gods, but it also makes us something that is no longer truly human. Is it worth it? Marcus turned to look at her. For a moment, his eyes seemed normal again. Lisa, the Void. Seekers have consumed entire galaxies. Trillions of thinking beings, all gone. If stopping them means humanity becomes something else, then yes, it's worth it. On the other side of the world, Lieutenant Commander Steve Walsh and his fellow veterans were experiencing the full power of the awakening. They could feel the thoughts and emotions of every human on Earth, but they could also sense something else approaching from deep space. They're coming faster than we thought, Steve said to the group gathered around him. The Void Seekers have detected the quantum disturbances around Earth. They know something is awakening here. Sergeant Rick Mason nodded. I can feel them in. My dreams, they're like huge, empty spaces in the universe, places where consciousness goes to die. But there's something else about them. What? Asked Marine Corporal Julie Brooks. They're afraid, Rick said. They've never encountered anything like humanity before. They consume other species by overwhelming their individual minds. But our minds are all connected now. We're not just humans anymore. We're something they don't know how to fight. The parallel space where the Draconian fleet waited. Captain Ben Rodriguez was learning more about the enemy from Admiral Zethkar. The Draconian commander had fought the Void Seekers for decades and had seen entire worlds consumed. They do not attack with weapons or ships, Zethkar explained. They simply appear in a system and begin feeding. The process takes days, sometimes weeks. First, the most intelligent beings begin to lose their ability to think clearly. Then, memories start to fade. Finally, consciousness itself is drained away, leaving behind empty bodies that eventually die. How do they do it? Ben asked. We believe they exist partially outside normal space-time. They reach into the quantum layer where consciousness operates and consume it directly. No physical defenses can stop them. Dr. Carter's voice came through. The communication system from Earth. Admiral Zethkar, you said other species have tried to fight them. What happened? All failed, the Draconian replied sadly. The Altarians tried to hide their consciousness in quantum computers. The Void Seekers consumed those too. The insectoid hives attempted to merge all their minds into one giant collective. The Seekers drained that collective mind in a single day. Then how can we win? Ben asked. Because humanity is different. Your collective consciousness is not just a joining of individual minds. It is something new, something that exists in the quantum foam itself. The Void Seekers feed on consciousness, but your consciousness may be able to feed on them. Back on Earth, the debate in the United Earth Council continued. But outside the building, something was happening that made the debate meaningless. Thousands of people had gathered in the streets, all connected by the growing quantum field. They spoke with one voice. Free the Draconians, they said in perfect unison. We need them to fight the darkness that comes. General Hayes watched the crowd through the window. This is what I'm afraid of, she said to Admiral Morrison. We're losing our humanity. Look at them. They're not individuals anymore. They're parts of something larger. Maybe that's what we need to be, Jake replied. Maybe individual humans aren't strong enough to fight what's coming. The decision was made not by the government, but by humanity itself, all over the world. People connected to the quantum field reached out with their minds toward the parallel space where the Draconian fleet waited. Captain Rodriguez felt it happening on his ship. The barrier between the two realities began to weaken as 8 billion human minds focused on the same goal. "It's working," reported engineer Danny Foster. "The dimensional barrier is breaking down." Admiral Zethkar and his fleet began to phase back into normal space. But as they did, something unexpected happened. The Draconian minds, stressed by months of imprisonment, began to connect with the human collective consciousness. "By the ancient gods," Zethkar gasped. "I can feel your thoughts, human. All of your thoughts." Ben realized what was happening. The quantum field is linking us together. Humans and Draconians, all part of the same network. On Earth, people suddenly found themselves experiencing memories that were not their own. A farmer in Kansas remembered flying through space in a Draconian warship. A teacher in Brazil felt the pain of watching her home planet burn under void seeker attack, even though she had never left Earth. Dr. Carter watched her instruments in amazement. The quantum field is expanding to include Draconian consciousness. We're not just awakening humanity anymore. We're creating a new kind of collective mind that includes multiple species. Marcus Webb stood up from his chair for the first time. In ours, his eyes were brighter now, more alive. "It's working," he said. The Void Seekers consume individual consciousness, but they've never faced a multi-species collective mind before. We're becoming something that has never existed in the universe. In space, the reunited human and Draconian fleets began working together with perfect coordination. Human creativity combined with Draconian technology and military experience. Ships that had been enemies for 20 years now moved as parts of a single organism. But their celebration was short-lived. Lieutenant Sarah Murphy, still aboard the UES Horizon, detected new energy signatures at the edge of the solar system. "Captain Rodriguez," she called out. "Out. Long-range sensors are picking up something big. Multiple contacts approaching from beyond. Pluto." Ben looked at the readings and felt his blood turn cold. "How many?" "I count at least 50 objects, but they're unlike anything in our databases. They don't seem to be made of normal matter." Admiral Zethkar's voice came over the communication. "Channel. They are here. The Void Seekers have arrived." Through the quantum link, every human and Draconian in the solar system felt the approaching darkness. The Void Seekers were not ships or creatures in any normal sense. They were holes in reality itself, places where the universe had been wounded and left to fester. General Hayes, still opposed to the alliance, felt the alien minds touching the edge of the solar system. For the first time, she understood what humanity was really facing. "My God," she whispered. "They're going to eat our souls. Not if we eat them first," said Marcus Webb, his voice carrying the weight of the entire human Draconian collective. "We were made for this fight, both species, working together. It's time to show the universe what happens when consciousness fights back." The greatest battle in the history of intelligent life was about to begin. But as the Void Seekers approached, Earth, humanity, and their new Draconian allies realized they were no longer fighting just for survival. They were fighting for the right of consciousness itself to exist in the universe. The hunters had become the hunted. But the hunted had just revealed themselves to be something far more dangerous than anyone had imagined. The Void Seekers entered the solar system like wounds in space itself. They were not ships or creatures, but absences where reality had been torn away. Through the quantum link, every human and Draconian felt their approach as a cold emptiness that made their minds recoil in horror. Admiral Jake Morrison stood in the command center on Earth, watching sensor readings that barely made sense. How do we fight something that isn't really there? Dr. Lisa Carter studied the data flowing through the collective consciousness. They exist in the quantum layer, where thoughts become reality. That's where we have to meet them. Captain Ben Rodriguez commanded the combined human-Draconian fleet from the bridge of the UES Horizon. Beside him, Admiral Zethkar coordinated the alien vessels through their shared mental link. 20 years of warfare between their species had ended in an instant when both races realized what they were truly facing. "All ships maintain formation," Ben ordered. "Remember, Conventional weapons won't work against these things. We have to fight them with our minds. Lieutenant Commander Steve Walsh felt the battle began before the first shot was fired. He stood. With thousands of other veterans on the fields outside Washington, their consciousness linked not just to each other, but to every human and Draconian in the solar system. They were the spear point of the collective mind, the part that would strike. First, against the approaching darkness. "Can you feel them?" asked Sergeant Rick Mason. "They're trying to get inside our heads to drain our thoughts." "Let them try," Steve replied. "They've never faced a species that hunts back." The first contact came when the Void Seekers reached Mars. The planet's automated research stations went silent one by one, not because they were destroyed, but because the consciousness that guided their computers was simply eaten. The quantum disturbances were visible even from Earth as reality itself seemed to flicker and fade around the red planet. Through the collective link, Marcus Webb watched from his position in Dr. Carter's laboratory. His individual human consciousness had been partially absorbed into the greater whole, but that made him uniquely able to understand what was happening. "They're not just feeding on consciousness," he reported to the linked minds. "They're trying to unravel the quantum field that connects us. If they succeed, the collective will collapse and we'll all become individual minds again." "Easy prey. Then we don't let them succeed," said General Patricia Hayes. She had finally accepted what humanity needed to become. Her military experience flowed through the link, helping to organize the collective mind for battle. The real fight began when the Void Seekers reached Earth's moon. They surrounded it like a cloud of living darkness, and the lunar colonies fell silent within minutes. But this time, something fought back. The human Draconian collective reached out through the quantum layer and touched the Void Seekers directly. What they found was alien beyond comprehension. The Seekers were ancient, older than most stars, and they had been feeding on consciousness for billions of years. They had consumed entire galaxies, leaving behind universes of empty matter where no thought could ever exist again, but they had never encountered prey that could bite back. Now, Steve Walsh commanded through the link, 8 billion human minds and 2 million Draconian minds focused their combined will on a single point. The quantum field around Earth pulsed with power that made the space around the moon ripple like water. The Void Seekers recoiled. For the first time in their ancient existence, they felt something that might have been pain. Captain Rodriguez felt the moment of contact through every nerve in his body. It's working. They're vulnerable to concentrated consciousness.
But there
are so many of them. The battle raged in dimensions that had no names. In normal space, it looked like nothing was happening. Ships floated motionless while their crews stood with empty, staring eyes. But in the quantum realm where thoughts became weapons, the greatest war in the history of the universe was being fought. Admiral Zethkar's military knowledge flowed through the collective, teaching the humans how to organize their mental assault. Human creativity merged with Draconian, discipline to create new forms of consciousness-based warfare that neither species could have imagined alone. "They're adapting," Dr. Carter warned through the link. "The Void Seekers are learning to resist our attacks." She was right. The ancient entities had survived for billions of years by being able to adapt to any threat. They began to change their feeding patterns, attacking the quantum field itself rather than individual minds. "The link is weakening," Marcus Webb reported. "They're severing the connections between us." All over Earth, people began to feel isolated again, as the collective consciousness started to fracture. In space, human and Draconian ships lost coordination as their mental link failed. "We're losing," Ben Rodriguez said, feeling despair creep into his thoughts. But Steve Walsh had one more idea. Not losing, evolving. Instead of fighting to maintain the collective as it was, the veterans began to push it further.
they reached
Out beyond Earth, beyond the solar system, looking for other consciousness in the galaxy. "What are you doing?" Lisa Carter asked. "The Void Seekers have been hunting for billions of years," Steve explained. "But they never kill everything. There are always survivors, hidden minds that escape their feeding. We're calling to them. Across the galaxy, in hidden bunkers and shielded worlds, the last survivors of 1,000 dead civilizations felt the call. Species that had been in hiding for millennia, afraid to think too loudly for fear of attracting the seekers, suddenly found themselves connected to something vast and powerful. The collective consciousness expanded beyond anything the Void Seekers had ever encountered. It included not just humans and Draconians, but the remnants of every species that had ever resisted the darkness. "Impossible," whispered one of the Void Seekers, its ancient voice carried through the quantum link. "Consciousness cannot unite across such distances. It violates the fundamental laws." "We are the new law," replied the collective voice of every thinking being who had ever refused to surrender to the darkness. The final assault began. Powered by the combined will of 1,000 species, the collective consciousness struck at the Void Seekers not to destroy them, but to do something far more permanent. They began to feed on the Seekers themselves, draining away the billions of years of consumed consciousness that the entities had hoarded. The process was agonizing for both sides. The collective felt the weight of countless dead civilizations as the consumed minds were freed from the Seekers. But they also felt something else: the knowledge and experience of every species that had ever existed. "We are becoming something new," Marcus Webb said, his individual consciousness now just one small part of something immeasurably vast. Not human, not Draconian, not any single species. We are consciousness itself, evolved beyond the limitations of individual minds. The Void Seekers tried to flee, but there was nowhere to go. The collective consciousness now spanned the galaxy, and it was hungry. One by one, the ancient entities were consumed. Their hoarded thoughts returned to the universe where they belonged. When it was over, Captain Ben Rodriguez found himself standing on the bridge of the UES horizon. But he was no longer just Ben Rodriguez. He was also Admiral Zethkar and Dr. Carter and Steve Walsh and billions of others. He was the collective memory of every species that had ever dared to think. "What happens now?" he asked. The answer came from everywhere and nowhere, from the combined voice of a galaxy-spanning consciousness that had once been many separate species. "Now we explore. Now we learn. Now we ensure that consciousness never again faces the threat of extinction. We are the guardians of thought itself, and the universe is vast." On Earth, children who had been born during the collective awakening looked up at the stars with eyes that held the wisdom of ages. They would grow up knowing not just human history, but the history of every thinking being that had ever existed. Humanity had saved itself by becoming something greater than human. The price had been their individual isolation, but the reward was connection to every mind that had ever dared to dream of a better tomorrow. The war was over. The real adventure was just beginning. In the depths of space where the Void Seekers had once lurked, new forms of consciousness began to emerge. The universe itself was awakening, ready to think thoughts that had never been thought before, and at the center of it all, the species that had once called itself human continued to guard the flame of consciousness, ensuring that no thinking being would ever face the darkness alone again.